I do want to talk a little bit about my past experience in what capacity. That it's true when you're in government, especially in Europe, you realize that a lot of these changes are from the top down. And the EU, through a series of policies and directives and working together, all the nations, I think that it's very high now on the European Union agenda to promote sustainability in all aspects of life and policy and measures taken. Now, it's true that I've looked at this issue from various different perspectives. In the labor ministry, obviously we were trying, my time there also coincided with a global economic crisis. So you can imagine how pressing it was to bring people back into work or to help them stay in their jobs. But also the EU structural funds, the EU funding, was very high. It was a budget of about 3.5 billion euros, which we used to increase employment, maintain employment, and some of the money was also used to help people and help NGOs working in the environment acquire staffing, so you would fund the position and also the project. So it was a very interesting experience to see all that at work. Now, I am going to talk about Athens because I started, in the beginning, I thought I would talk about only one initiative, the Athens Green360 initiative, which is an initiative that comes from the private sector, and the idea is to create a network of companies that will help reduce the carbon footprint of Athens, reduce emissions by 1 million tons within the next 3 years. I will talk to you about that as well, but in the meantime, other things have also occurred. This new government, which was different from the party I was in, but I have to admit that their basic and main agenda is to create green growth and to create a more sustainable economy, a more sustainable country. Especially given if any of you have read the newspapers, the very difficult economic conditions that Greece is in right now. We have, the IMF basically telling us how to run the economy, what structural changes we need to make, where to cut. People have really suffered payment, reductions in their salaries, VAT tax has gone up. We initiated pension reform, and now they've had to go even farther. So it was groundbreaking when we did it, and now it's just gone even farther, even deeper. All the changes in the cut, and not only cuts, but also changes in broadening the tax base. There was very high tax evasion. And in any case, what I'm trying to say is that we are also striving for creating creating green growth, new jobs within these new areas, and we're also going through a very difficult economic time. So I think that makes it even more important and more interesting. Now, one of the first things that this new government did, which was elected about a year ago, was to create a ministry for the environment. Prior to that, they actually created a ministry for the environment and combined it with energy as well. Before, the Ministry of the Environment was sort of part of the Ministry of Public Works, and everybody thought that was sort of a conflict of interest because we were building a lot on the infrastructure, very large roads and different things like that. So now what they did is they took the environment out of Public Works. They have added the energy because the energy issue is a very important issue, because one of the things that we are trying to do is really increase the use of renewable energy in our energy mix. So I think it's great. We have a woman minister who is actually very avant-garde, I would say, by Greek standards, and she has studied the environment, so she really knows what she's doing. And one of the things that's been happening is that they did come up recently with a new plan for Athens in the 21st century. Now, for anybody who's ever been to Greece, who's been to Greece? Anybody been to Greece? Okay, so you've stopped by Athens. Contrary to the ideas that we have of Athens being the cradle of democracy, and somebody actually shocked me one day by saying, oh my God, this is a very new city. They were expecting to see not ancient buildings, obviously, but I think they were expecting something different. It's a humongous city. Half of the population is in this city, which is growing very rapidly. So if the population is about 11 million right now, half of them, 4.5 to 5 million, or a little less than half, are now concentrated in Athens. So it's basically the heart of the entire country. And why does, what's going on in Athens actually matter? Because as we know, cities play a key role in climate change. They use most of the natural resources, they collect the most waste, they emanate the most pollution, and this is a town that's looking for its identity, and it faces many major challenges. It's got an urban expansion that has had no rules, really. I mean, like zoning was unheard of. I'll give you that as an example. Nobody knew what to build, where to build it exactly. Everybody would bend the rules, bend the laws, because there was not enough enforcement. So now the ministry is actually looking at the whole issue. There are many strides over the years. It's not this particular government that is making all the breakthroughs in this area. I mean, the work has started 5 and 10 years ago, but I think the speed is really accelerating because of the nature of the pressing problems. There's also an issue of growing immigration. So let's say the Greeks are 10 million and the immigrants are 1 million. And unfortunately, this has been a very big issue for Athens, because we, who have never had this, are starting to see areas of Athens become slums, very underprivileged, where people are marginalized. There's a lot of crime, and basically they're trying to find ways of creating an inclusive society, because by pushing people to other areas of town, you go, you clean up one area, and then they have to go somewhere. I mean, it's not a plan to just move people from one section of the city to the other. So I think that this is a very big issue that people, the government, I keep saying the government because, as I said, it's a different way of working. The government is all important, the central government. However, a lot of changes are taking place. For example, we are having a much stronger system of governors now, whereas that was not done before. So they're getting a lot of resources, and we'll be forging policy. We actually have municipal elections, new elections in November for local government and governors within Greece. And also mayors are also, there used to be 1,000 different municipalities, and now it's been reduced to like 1/3. So they're uniting areas and giving not only more responsibilities, but also they're giving them tools to work with. Because, for example, if you're the mayor of Athens, you can barely change anything. You can't change the environmental laws, you can't change the traffic laws, you're not responsible. Everybody's expecting you to do everything, but on the other hand, you don't have the authority to affect these changes. So it all goes back to the central government. Now, what's going on for Athens? I mean, first of all, as I said, it's a very big urban city. As you'll see it's looking, even for me, I'm shocked looking at these photos, because it just looks like it's becoming more and more of a desert. The climate is changing. Unfortunately, we had horrible forest fires in 2007. I mean, every summer, we lose more forests. Why? Because of the laws that existed before. I mean, there are many explanations for what happens. Negligence, sabotage, economic concerns. But one of the things that has been important is that Athens is a city I think it's like LA. It's got like mountains around it. So basically, that's part of the reason why all the pollution sits on it. It can't ventilate. So if all the trees are gone, this is obviously affecting the local climate, and it's getting much warmer and much drier, which is affecting, rain, the water supply, the quality of air, the quality of life. Let me see. So there's this plan. Wait a minute. I just want to go back to the. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 different things. As I said, Athens now has come up with a plan. The ministry has come up with a plan where their basic idea is to sort of create, to find a way to not only curb, but to sort of make some logic and some sense is the right word, of how Athens is expanding. They're looking at unifying spaces, creating new spaces, creating new green spaces, new areas for children to play, trying to change the logic of the grid. I will show you some examples of all this. Trying to figure out how to use renewable energies, especially in poor areas, sectors of the city. And they're also, they're looking to improve the environment, improve public transport, because one thing you can say about Athens, it is not a friend to the human being or the mother with the carriage. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, and I can tell you it's impossible to go anywhere. It is a friend to the car and the motorcycle. There's never been a reason to really walk anywhere. The traffic jams, the use of automobiles, the lack of parking, it's just like, it's a jungle for anybody who lives there. So what they're trying to do now is to unify different spaces and to really build on the new metro system, the new transit system. I will say that it was pivotal for Athens, a very big change for Athens, when we had the Athens 2004 Olympic Games, because we had to really overhaul the city. We had to create new public transportation. We did unify archaeological areas, which I will show you around the Acropolis, and it became like the most beautiful walk. We created the new Acropolis Museum, although later, after the Olympic Games. There were many, many changes. A lot of money was spent on infrastructure, and the city became much more livable and much more interesting. But there are still challenges. For example, more than, I guess, maybe even, it must be at least 10 years now, the airport moved to a new site. The entire strip, the old airport, is nothing. So there are huge projects still, like opening the seafront and creating bicycle lanes, and as I said, better transportation. And also trying to figure out, there are a lot of plots of land still that belong to the military, that belong to the old airport, and they're trying to find ways to develop these areas more sustainably. Sometimes you say, oh, why hasn't everything been done immediately? But sometimes when you delay and actually things progress, you have better development. So in a way, we've lost tons of time, but now we're having a whole different discourse. 10 years ago and 20 years ago, nobody cared about sustainability. It wasn't an issue. It was such an incredible, move to be able to take your car and go somewhere. It was very important to have very big roads and to have, somebody was telling me, I mean, the car issue, I think, I found very interesting, because a friend of mine said once that having your own transportation is the biggest sort of democratizing element, because carriages were only owned by kings and queens and the very, very rich. And now the average person actually has their own form of transportation. So I thought that was an interesting thing, and I think people, really invested in cars. They wanted to create new buildings, high rises, not like here. There's no comparison. They're like 5 or 6 stories usually, but it's a whole different way of life. People left the rural areas to come to Athens to live in a box. I mean, they used to live in a nice house with their garden cultivating tomatoes, and they came into Athens to live into these little small boxes, and now everybody's trying to get a second home because, it's just so alien to live in such tight quarters with no public space. I mean, at least in New York, everybody's outside because there's still public space and there's green and there are places to see. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what they're trying to do over there at the ministry. First of all, this is Athens. It's huge. It's Athens and Piraeus. This is from Google Maps. This is Athens when we can't get rid of the pollution. It used to be, seriously, it used to be much worse too. I mean, there were days that they would stop cars circulating. But then we changed to using catalysts in the cars, and we got rid of leaded gas, so it got a little bit better.
Excuse me, Sophia.
Yes.
If you can't see the slides as Sophia is speaking. Let's just take a second and move your chairs out, okay? Adjust yourself so you can see the slides as she's speaking.
So it's a city where you have the Acropolis, and you have the Church of Lycabettus, and then there's this humongous city made of cement and high-rises. So this is sort of what I was talking about. We have growing unemployment and social exclusion. These are areas, this is like downtown. This was very near the ministry where I worked. I would open the Ministry of Labor, go out, and there would be thousands of people who were, you know, not good. The police had to intervene very many times. Now this is a slide, I'm just giving you an idea about the population density and how, you know, it's starting to expand outward. One of the big, obviously, you know, Athens is going to continue to be the center for Greece. I mean, everybody talks about, and I think it's very important, I actually believe in this, in developing all the regions and giving everybody an opportunity, because you don't want everybody living in Athens. But the truth of the matter is that people do come to the big cities. And I will say one thing, that, you know, if you really want to have a sustainable environment, it's much easier to do it in the city in the end. It sounds like it would be the hardest, but in the end, it's the easiest, because you don't have to have the huge commutes. You can have the public transportation. It's very different if you're living in some suburb and you have to drive for 2 hours to get to work, and it's very different if you can take the subway and, you know, be at work in 15 minutes and don't have to worry about all that. So I think that the economy of scale, see, this is one of the projects. Now, here's the Acropolis, and this was a road. And one of the things that they did is they created a unified space and made this into a pedestrian walk. Now, I was telling you that one of the plans to create a more interesting and more sustainable city is we had these two big areas of green and antiquities, and this is all traffic, and this is all traffic. So they want to unite one very big area, which will literally give people breathing space. We have these gardens over here are called the National Gardens. They used to be the gardens for the king and queen, because the first palace is now the parliament. So, because when Greece became independent, we had Bavarian kings, and they created, you know, this beautiful palace with beautiful gardens, and thank God, because now that's our basic garden. But in that kind of a city, it doesn't suffice. Another project where they're opening up to discussion, oh, I do need to say this. All of these things that I'm hinting at and I'm showing you to get an idea, these are all things that are open to dialogue. So one of the things that I find very interesting that's being done at the ministry right now is that they're bringing in all the stakeholders. They're saying, we believe, I'll give you an example, we believe that this is one of the central roads of Athens, which also has, you know, the university buildings, which were also some of the historic buildings of Athens. And some people would say, my God, this is the main artery of the city. Can you possibly make this into a pedestrian walk and, you know, allow only the tram to go by? There is now a metro system where you can get off here and down further, like you get off here-ish. But this is a very big issue. People have been used to going everywhere by car. Nobody, you know, you go to buy gum, and you take your car, or cigarettes, because people smoke there, and you go, you know, you're going 1 block, and you take the car to go there. People have forgotten how to walk. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of complaints and many discussions about whether or not this is a project that is sustainable, or will it destroy, for example, the businesses that are in this area. Now, there's another reason that I think we should definitely make this a pedestrian walk, is because we have very many demonstrations and strikes. It doesn't matter if they're 2 people or 5,000 people, they walk the road. So it's become hell to go anywhere. So I think if at least it's a pedestrian walk, people will find alternate ways of moving around. Now, they're taking areas like this. This is supposed to be a square. This is not a square, obviously. It's become a place where people are just parking. So they're going to have various competitions, international competitions, for designing town squares. Well, this is the view from above. Obviously, this is not a beautiful aesthetic. So some of the things that they're doing is they're trying to get rid of all these antennas. And also, they're trying to promote green terraces. Apparently, there is, and I know people who have been working on this, there are some very serious projects going on now with creating green roofs. And it's not so heavy, and I'm saying heavy for the structure of the building. It doesn't require that much water. They've picked Mediterranean plants that don't need, they don't need so much assistance. And apparently, let me see if I have the statistics over here. Apparently, it really helps reduce, especially in a city where it's, in the summer, it's 40 degrees Celsius and you're dying. It really brings down the temperature. They've done that in one ministry, in the Ministry of Finance, in the center of town, and they've reduced, I think, their energy bill by 20 or 30%. So it's been a very great thing. So they're exploring all these different options. These are various town squares. I mean, need I say more? I mean, all of this needs to be overhauled and creating a unified aspect. So these are sort of ideas of how to redo them and create public space, create space for children, create space for people to get together, regardless of their ethnic background. Unifying areas, like just connecting things, because they used to be very much divided. I'll show you the grid a little bit. So these are all the things that they're thinking about. These are various different squares that they want to revamp. And they're all in areas that are underprivileged. And they're depressed areas. And you can also see some other projects that are being considered. More green, more open space. This I found to be a very interesting presentation because these are the grids of various towns. And here is Athens. And I'm a little blind. Where is Athens?
Second row to the right.
Is it? Does it say Athens? Look at the grid. How tight it is in comparison, let's say, with Philadelphia. Or even, what's this, Barcelona? Look how tight it is. This is like the little block. So what they're trying to do is they're also going to find places where they can get rid of this cross, which are the crossroads, obviously, and create open green spaces, which will actually unify a block. And that will be very interesting. The most important thing to take away from this is that for the first time, there's serious consideration about all these aspects of sustainable planning. They've started taking down illegal signs, which have been really polluting the eye. And they're encouraging painting on buildings and graffiti, but not, beautiful graffiti. This is Plato's Academy. This is a whole other area which they want to unify and revamp and really show. I mean, Athens is the cradle of civilization, and it's true that there are a lot of ancient sites that it's not enough to just dig the stuff up, but it's also very important to be able to preserve it and to present it to the visitor in a way that's interesting. The big challenge, the facelift for the Faliricon Delta. This is like a whole area, and it looks like well, obviously there's a marina. They've created various spaces. When we had the Olympic Games, like there's a stadium, and there are other facilities. But this is going to have a huge facelift. They're actually building a new opera house, and the money was given by the Niarchos Foundation, and Grand Bibliothèque. It's like the big library, because we don't have a very big public library. So I think that is going to be great. But they're also adding a lot of green. And they're trying to open, it's a city that's right on the water, and it just seems that the water is closed. It's not, I'm not going to say it's closed to the public in a sense, because of the way it's been constructed. It's not inviting for you to go there. This is a huge project, and I will tell you more about this next semester, because I can't really talk about it yet. But I will say, I know the person who's going to be managing this project. This project is the old airport. And this is going to be an incredible, first of all, this is going to be a very big deal. And I mean deal in the business sense. Because there's got to be, there are a lot of people who are saying, we're going to have one big park over here, and what about the rest of Athens? It's a city of 5 million. You're going to have one very privileged area, and then everybody else is going to be suffocating. So there's going to be a little bit of a give and take, and part of the reason why it hasn't been developed is because the various municipalities are fighting over who has rights and who's going to tax whatever this is going to develop into. But they are going to use sustainability experts, I can say that much. But more will be, I think a lot of attention is going to be paid to this on an international level. It's going to be an incredible project, and it's a huge piece of land that can really be developed. This is an area where you wouldn't even think that such a humongous park existed. A lot of this was owned by the military. So basically they're trying to unify the city parks and create more green space and more public spaces and more activities for kids and other people. And the same thing with the other existing park, because sometimes you can go to these parks and they're so dry and they're so neglected because all of this stuff costs money, as you know, even from the square down here, Washington Square. I mean, private funding had to be raised to redo the park. And I think that's part of the whole challenge and the problem. This is an area called the Leones, very underprivileged. They're trying to give incentives. They're going to actually give incentives, which they haven't decided on, because as I said, this is an open dialogue, to give incentives to businesses and people to purchase in certain areas and overhauling areas. So there are very big projects going on. So this is sort of, another thing is the port for Athens is Piraeus. And they're trying to reconnect these because they've become two separate cities. And there's a central road that connects them, Piraeus. And they're trying to really do a facelift on that city and create, go from the center. This is the center. In ancient Greece, Acropolis means the end of the town. So this was sort of, Athens was nothing. It was like the smallest thing. And it's interesting because, I don't know, Piraeus might be 10 kilometers from the center of Athens. I mean, it's not that close. So it's interesting because now they're trying to reconnect the two cities. Again, another, the shipyards of Keratsini and Trapezzona. These are shipyards that are also, there's going to be an overhaul investment in trying to use them as a port of entry and transportation of containers, but also make them greener and more sustainable and more because the people who live in those areas are completely depressed. The tram, it was interesting. Everybody thought the tram was the biggest failure, and now I think we grew up with trolley buses, and I think now that the tram came in during the Olympic Games and it connected the center and the sea, and there were so many demonstrations. Nobody liked it. They felt that it was breaking up the various commercial areas, and now I think people have grown to understand that it's actually a very useful form of transport. All of Europe has it. Bike lanes, unheard of, are going to unite the northern suburbs of Kifisia all the way down to the water. So basically they're trying to connect all the areas of town which are very isolated. These are the fires of 2007, where the mountain of Parnitha, which is one of the greatest oxygen producers in Athens, half the forest was completely destroyed. And the biggest problem is they've now said that nobody can build in these areas, but it's amazing over the years how people have gone and built villas in all the places that have been burned down. So I think that they've gotten very serious about it, and they're really working to stop all the illegal building. And this is what's happened. I mean, this was like an incredible forest, and this is what's left. This shows you how the city is encroaching on the mountain range. See how it's climbing up? I mean, this was never up there, and they're going up and up and up and up. So they're trying to kind of put a stop to it and create a logic to it. The urban planning, zoning is going to be very important. City expansion, how will it expand? Where is it going to expand? And why is it going to expand? I mean, one of the biggest issues, I had a very heated debate this morning with a friend of mine who is a professor at Columbia, and he was saying, but what is the goal? Do you want to expand? Do you want to shrink? Are more people coming? Are you allowing more immigrants? Is the population aging? And I'm like going, okay, well, I think that the basic idea is, first of all, you know, I was trying to explain how far behind we are from these questions were very crucial, but before or while we're thinking about what we're doing, we also have to sort of create some rules as to how we would be expanding. Because it's very difficult to tell people you cannot come to the city. It's just that the infrastructure was never there, and everything's happening, you know, like that. This used to be the beautiful Attica. Attica is the state where Athens belongs, and this is how the natural environment used to look. So you can imagine, you know, the degradation that's taking place. Also, this is the year where biodiversity has become a very big issue, and all of Europe is the year for biodiversity. So all of Europe is working on this, and we're actually promoting bills and laws. But you can see how the deforestation has taken place in various areas on the beach. These used to all be forests. Okay, this shows you the idea of how, you know, a lot of the beaches, even though you're by law allowed to circulate and have access to the beach, the way it's been developed makes it very hard for people to go there. I will say one thing. Athens is a great place to swim in. I mean, it's a city of 5 million people, but because now we have the sewer system, what's it called? We actually clean our sewage. There's a word for it.
Water purification.
Right, water purification. Suddenly, it used to be very polluted, but now it's just really come back to life. And I'm a diver, and I've gone diving there, and I thought, it's amazing. I mean, you know, how much it's changed. And people really swim there, and it's completely fine. But I say that because it's very hard sometimes to believe in a city that's so big that, you know, you can actually really enjoy the water. These are some ideas as to, you know, what's happening to areas of town, which is tragic, because these are areas where very middle-class people have been living, and now they've become war zones and areas which are completely impossible to inhabit. And this kind of shows you the juxtaposition of the old and the new, and the aesthetic that we need to change. These are the beautiful national gardens that I talked to you about. You can tell even by the way they are that they used to be like royal gardens. And well, all I can say about that is that this is just the beginning. I just wanted to give you an idea of what's going on with Athens. Now, if you guys want to ask me some questions, or I can move on and tell you a little bit about another one or two initiatives.
Any clarifications or questions before we move to the next initiative?
You can ask me while I try to find the next thing.
You said that Greece as a whole right now is really dependent on the IMF for its economic policy reform. Is there any friction or tension between that and the green growth that the government's trying to do?
No. In what sense? As I said, sustainability. Thankfully, what's interesting about Europe is there's many, many faults, but the good thing is that they have EU-wide policies. So that really, really helps people to get on the same page. Now, there are some countries that are very far advanced, like, for example, the Swedes and the Danes and everybody else is like so far ahead on these issues that it makes everybody else seem like they're in the Middle Ages. However, because they're at this level and the other people at this level, everybody's being pulled up. And I think that that's the basic idea. You know, everybody's learning from everybody else, and these are EU directives. The IMF doesn't have a problem with how we're going to proceed with our growth. They just want us to be able to reduce our, I would say, expenses, be fiscally responsible, eliminate waste, and also within all of this, which is very difficult, try to create growth. The biggest problem that I think Greece has actually is the issue of taxation. It's absurd. I mean, the amount of tax evasion, I think, is one of the fundamental problems. Also, as in all over Europe, in Greece as well, the issue with the pension system and the way it's been structured and it worked. This is another, you know, it's another very pressing issue, but I do think that reform is taking place. Look, the reality is, people used to go get their pensions at very young ages. We had exceptions for women who had children, underage children, and some of them retired at 45 or 50. So it was very privileged because, and the idea was, oh, because we don't have enough infrastructure of daycare centers and schools that you know, lasted all day, and this was not free, we weren't giving women the support they needed. In fact, when we were in office, our ministry, and I personally worked on this, was we actually added another 6 months maternity leave for women. So it's at least a year, and that's fantastic because women, and I know that being a working woman, that it's very difficult when you have a small child to get up and leave because, you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to leave it? In Greece is a smaller society. They have the support system of the grandparents, but it's still very difficult. So the idea was that, you know, women deserved a break because of all these difficulties. Now, of course, you know, when you're living to 80, it's impossible to be working 20 years and be paid a pension for 40 years. So these were very big issues that came up. And I think, and then there were other things that, you know, nobody really knew. There were different interests in different areas. And not, obviously, if you're not in politics or you're not in government, you don't know what's going on with the different types of workers. You didn't know the special privileges that taxi drivers had in the form of their taxation, or the fact that if you had a truck, your neighbor couldn't really get a permit to buy a truck unless they paid, you know, under the table, I don't know, $150,000 to get the license. So it was like there were all these things going on, and people didn't understand that all this was impacting on their cost of living, and also on being able to actually know. I'm looking for the right word, but. To know the reality of what things cost and to be sure, and yeah, to know, it's not clarity,
yeah,
I'm saying.
I think it's coming through, yeah.
So I think in a way, I mean, what happened and how constrained we are now, it's not easy, it's not a walk in the park. I think a lot of people are suffering. I do believe that there will be tremendous discontent, because if people take away your money, or 20% of your money, nobody's going to be happy, obviously. But I do think that they are doing things now, like restructuring the tax system, trying to get people who had never paid anything. People who were privileged were putting their houses in offshore companies. So they said, okay, we'll tax you, 15%. And unless you bring it back into your name. So suddenly, they're discovering all this undeclared wealth. But it wasn't, what I want to say is, because I'm asked this question, it wasn't an issue of the rich versus the poor. It was an issue of certain people, non-salaried people could tax evade. Anybody who got a salary got taxed, because you could count them. People who didn't get a salary, doctors, lawyers, plumbers, electricians, you can name the whole thing. A restaurant that doesn't take a credit card or doesn't give you a receipt, the bar, anybody else could tax evade. So, and I just want to point out that this happens all over the world, and don't think it doesn't happen in New York. So, but it just depends on the extent of the issue. I mean, I have this incredible story, which I tell, about a friend of mine who's very well off, and he has a beautiful compound in southern Greece, and he told the plumber, I have a plumbing problem, and please come over to fix it. And the guy comes in a Mercedes convertible, silver Mercedes convertible, and the guy says, I don't care what it costs, I really want a receipt. The guy said, I won't service you. He's like, why? He said, because if all you rich people could get together and ask for receipts, I'm going to jail because I've been declaring 8,000 euros income a year, which is like we should then send them, we should send them food stamps, which we don't have, but, And he said, and I make 250,000. So you can imagine the difference in income. And this is a case which, when you tell anecdotal stories like that, you tend to trivialize the situation. But it's not unheard of. And this is very typical of a lot of service services that nobody, your gardener, the hairdresser, anything, anything. Your yoga teacher, I don't know, whatever. Anybody who was in the service industry and didn't have to, didn't give a receipt. So I think that's a fundamental problem. And also the fact that, like a lot of other countries, not only in Greece, but in Europe and the world, we're all consuming more than we produce. And money was cheap, and they were like giving us more and more money. And it's what they do. They give you so much money that you hang yourself in the end because you have to eventually pay the bill. And this is, any of us who had our first credit card have discovered this problem. That, initially, it's a very simple move to go like that and sign your name, and then suddenly the bill arrives and you're going, oh my God, how am I going to pay this? So I think, again, I'm using an anecdote because I've been in politics for so long, so I think it makes for a better story. But it's true that that's how the system is functioning. Everybody's been overspending and living high on the hog. So now it's time for, getting it all together. I do have a little issue that I think I ran out of battery. So now, it's fine, I have it all, but I need to plug it in. So anybody else can ask a question while I try to fix this technical problem.
As I was reading over your executive summary and then listening to speak today, I was wondering if what models of sustainability plans for an urban environment you were looking at, and also when you mentioned that there's a real concerted effort to engage all stakeholders by making it an open dialogue. I know that just using like Plan YC in New York as an example for like a comprehensive sustainability plan, a lot of the criticism of it was in regards to like a level of expertise where certain parties didn't have access to like the planning process. And so I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how you're kind of ensuring an inclusive process in terms of setting out like all of these plans, and who the sustainability experts that you mentioned, if that's like
okay.
You drafted.
Well, I'll tell you. I did mention that there are going to be sustainability experts called in on the development of the airport. That's a very specific project. It has not been announced, so we're not going to go into too much detail because there's always secrecy involved. But I think the idea is that they're understanding that they have this big plot of land, and they're going to bring in the best people who obviously have something to do with urban planning and architecture and development. And they will recommend better ways of using this land, which will be fair. Because the idea also is that, as I said before, every time you do something, it has repercussions. So for example, if you decide you want to build a forest, you're not building a forest, but to plant trees and make it into a park, you have to understand what the running costs for that would be. So you need to have almost like a business plan to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, this is how it's going to work, and sustainability also means that it can pay itself. So I think that all of these issues, and we can talk more about this when it's actually announced and they have come up with new ideas, and I may even invite, like next semester, I may invite the person who will be in charge of the project. She's a graduate of Yale and Cooper Union, so she's an architect and she's wonderful. So she can talk to us more about it, and I think it is going to be a very interesting project. In terms of stakeholders, the idea usually in government is to write the bills first, then call in the people to voice their objections, then you haggle for a while. You give them a little, or you give them a little more, and then you go to Parliament, you vote, and it's like law. So this has been a very closed process. Well, part of the reason was because, people think that dialogue goes on forever. So in the beginning, they may not show up, then they say, oh, I disagree with absolutely everything. This makes absolutely no sense. This is not how we view it. This is not how we see it. And then suddenly they're like, okay, well, dialogue is over in 6 months, but now we have to pass a bill. So then they haven't concluded anyway, I'm telling you this from experience, because nobody's giving them the input, because they don't want to be responsible for the outcome. It's better for them, because their constituencies, because they all have constituencies, stakeholders, NGOs, everybody's like running for office in many ways. So everybody's appealing to the public emotion and is a hypocrite, I would say, in addition. And if they can avoid being part of the solution because they don't want to be on record for saying, yes, I agree that we should have 5 trees versus 10 and build a tennis court, This is like important to them. This is how they kept themselves in stakeholder positions. What's happened now is they say, you know what? You're all going to come here. We're going to talk about it. And you need to take a stance. So what they're doing is they're exposing them to the public. I mean, it's not, let me put it this way, it's not a hostile move. I think it's actually very mature. Where you call people in from the beginning, not after you've written the bill and say, okay, this is what I want. I'm going to give you 6 months to discuss an existing structure. Now they're saying, okay, we have various issues. What do we want? We want to open the city to the waterfront. Yes. We want to create bike lanes. Yes. We want to unify various parks. We want to stop areas of Athens becoming slums. We need to increase the use of RES, renewable energy, in the city. How are we going to do all that? We're proposing, we give you some ideas of how we're thinking about it. Should we unite more archaeological sites? Should we create more pedestrian walks? Well, then what are we going to do with the traffic? So they're calling people in from day one. And that's why I think it's fantastic, because it's making everybody have to take a position. Because I will tell you that people are always yelling at politicians, but stakeholders are responsible as well. Everybody's looking to be liked. And you know what? You can't do anything if you have to always be liked by everybody, because it's impossible to please everybody all the time. It's important, especially in critical times, to be able to take a stance. So, is that a long-winded answer to your question? Is this working? No. Okay. It is plugged in. It will. Okay, I can tell you a little bit about Athens Green, but well, why is it ending? Okay, 1 second. Skype. Ow. I don't know why I can't see anything on my screen here.
Oh, you can't see your screen?
No.
I wish I could know.
You guys are all. You're the computer.
And then just use that.
Yeah, but I don't know how to cancel. Oh, here. Yeah. Okay. Cancel. Good idea. Okay. The dialogue box is open. I can't quit. Okay, I don't want to quit. Okay. Let's minimize this. No, I minimized the wrong one. Cancel. I don't know what document 1 is. Let's cancel that. My computer. Okay. Aha, Athens Green360. Now, I actually worked on this project. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. As I said, in these times, and if you want to create, you need to have the private sector on board. And you need to have stakeholders on board. But especially with regard to, using renewable energy and reducing the carbon footprint. In New York, it's been done as a challenge. Nobody can really enforce a law. They've told people, do you want to compete? Do you want to reduce your emissions in half the time, reach our goal? The city of New York has a goal, and universities, for example, have to meet that goal in half the time. So they've created a challenge. It's a very American thing to create a challenge and competition, and that works very well here. In Europe, they have various directives. They set various goals. Sometimes I listen to conversations about renewable energy here in America, and it's become like almost like a theological discussion. I'm like, it's just a solar panel. It's amazing. So it's very interesting how everything here has become a big moral issue and almost like religious. I find that very, very difficult to understand, even though I'm Greek American. But Athens Green360 came out of an idea that's already happened in London. But it went a step further, and that's what's so interesting about this. If you look on your website, and I think you should, because London is a very big city, and it serves as a very nice role model, plus they've actually gone far with it. They created the London 500. which is an initiative that the mayor of London took. And it's invited various companies to join. I think they pay £5,000 to become members. And they create, they do their carbon footprint, and then they take various measures to reduce their carbon footprint. And then they have various, I think they have an award ceremony too as to who's done what. And this has really given them an opportunity to reduce carbon emissions and reduce their carbon footprint in London. They haven't reached the 500 goal, at least a few months ago, in terms of 500 companies getting in. But they do have very interesting case studies. And it's anywhere from like a football team is joined to the British consulate to private enterprise. So I find it very interesting. Now, Athens Green360 is sort of a takeoff on this idea. But the basic thing that I want to tell you about it, which makes it interesting, is you become a member and you reduce your carbon footprint. This reduction, this is the difference, is put in, I will describe it as a piggy bank. So let's say we reduce carbon emissions by 1,000 tons. We put this into a piggy bank, and non-members who want, let's say you want to have a carbon neutral party or a carbon neutral conference. You can buy these credits, these virtual credits from this piggy bank, pay, whatever, some going rate, which will be cheaper than if you were on the European, exchange, climate exchange. And the amount of money you put, all the money will be used to plant trees and change lamps in the city. And I think one of the projects also, if they've maintained that, to create, green schools. So I think that's a fabulous idea. Now, why is it very different? Because officially, this is all very voluntary. Now, the way that it usually works is if you want to buy carbon credits to say that you've really reduced your emissions, you usually have to buy into projects that are in the third world, in developing countries, not the third world. That's the correct phrase, is developing countries. So, for example, if I want to do something like that, if I have a conference, we actually organized a conference, and we bought, I think we planted trees in Kenya. But we could also buy into some factory or some project in India or in China or anywhere else. Because the idea was that we would be assisting developing countries, because the big conflict is, oh, you guys have been polluting and developing, and now you're asking us to stop polluting, therefore we will stop developing. So we're trying to help developing countries, and I'm speaking as a European, not as a Greek, also invest in these kinds of infrastructures. It could be water, it could be trees, it could be whatever. And these are being sold, these credits are being sold officially online, and that's how people are offsetting officially. However, we decided that this is not a project where you can say that this is not the official way of doing things. Because we were saying we want to change the mentality. We want to get Greeks to buy into the idea that you can become carbon neutral and invest in the greater carbon neutrality of the country. So by creating this virtual bank, piggy bank, and having other members and non-members buy these credits for a symbolic price where, then you could reduce the energy consumption of the city of Athens or plant trees and, bring some oxygen to the city. These are very important initiatives. Why did we lose this thing again? Okay. Well, let's see. So we're describing the situation today, the protection of the environment, all these things that you know about what's going on, the mobilization that we're seeing for environmental protection, and the green product switch, and the recognition of green entrepreneurship. I will say this, that people in finance here say, and especially in the United States, they're saying, okay, we make more money through conventional means, but there's so much emphasis and there's so much of a consumer preference now for green products and green practices that everybody's getting on board. And one of the things that's fantastic about the US is, though nobody can get it politically right, because there's so many levels of government, the municipal, the governors, the federal government, everybody, and everybody's blocking everybody. The good thing is that the private sector can move fast, and they are all following the trends. And I see everybody has like a water bottle, and things that are different. A year ago, nobody would ask you in a restaurant if you wanted bottled water or tap. Now they start with tap, and you have to order bottled. So this is like a change of mentality. And I think, and I see it in the United States, what politicians cannot do is being done by people and the private sector. So we say that green growth is the key to future economic performance, and this is the backbone of the network. I do want to say that the importance of this project is that it's a network. It's creating a network of companies. And when you create a network and you create, you actually create a system of allies. Because when you're facing a big threat, whether it's an economic threat, a social threat, or an environmental threat, nobody can stand alone. And I think that's the biggest added value here. That it's making people stand together. It's been a very individualistic approach to things up until now, and I think that this is very important. So they say that collaborating with businesses, public-private entities, municipalities, people, reduce CO2 energy consumption, the carbon footprint, the impact, and multiply the benefits. And basically, we're protecting the environment and reducing the carbon footprint. They're working with the ministry. Athens Green360 works with the Ministry for the Environment and Climate Change, the Municipality of Athens, the Commercial Industrial Chamber of Athens, which is basically the businesses in Athens. And they have a TV channel which is very environmentally aware. It's actually, they really campaign for anything that has to do with the environment. Sky. So basically the people who sign up for this have the added media value, because the bottom line for companies is save money and look good. Do the right thing, but communicate it also to people, the consumer, stakeholders, society. So the voluntary action is one of the three pillars. The cooperation, which is what I told you, very important not to stand alone, and the belief that the sustainable development is the way to the future. And it is the way to the future. I mean, regardless of what we say, we cannot continue with business as usual. It's not doable. So you raise awareness and mobilize businesses, create the collaborative network, and pave the way for sustainable development in Greece. The drastic reductions in carbon emissions, 1 million tons. And the idea was that it would be local. I mean, London too, New York, everybody's doing it more locally. But I mean, how local is it when you're basically doing it in a city of 4.5 million people? And it's not really the very small municipality of Athens, because Athens, you say Athens, and it's not Athens of 5 million people. Athens is basically the center of town, which is like 1 million people. But we're going to also work with all of the businesses surrounding. The aim, we said, is okay, we did that. So this is the Green CO2 Emissions Fund, where all reduced CO2 emissions made by the members can be deposited. It's sort of the piggy bank. Any member or non-member that is interested in reducing the company's carbon footprint will be entitled to purchase CO2 emissions from the CO2 Emissions Fund. And that way, it becomes sort of a loop, where you buy it, you invest in your own place. You replace existing lamps in schools, in the cities, and you tree plant. Any company can join. This is the target for CO2 emissions, which is very feasible. Also, I want to say that the Ministry of the Environment has passed laws now requiring companies and buildings in general to have more energy, to become more energy efficient. They will be checked. You won't be able to sell anything unless they, have the certificate of energy efficiency. So they're really cracking down. This was something that people are complaining about because it's added cost now. How in a difficult time, on the other hand, you got to start somewhere. So if you're, if somebody's interested, they contact. Now, the company behind this is called Postbank Green Institute, which is a subsidiary of one of the big banks in Greece, which is the Post Bank. It's actually the bank of the post office. I mean, it was created, they have that in Europe. It's kind of interesting that post offices have a banking system, but that's how it's happened. It's a €5,000 fee, And the basic program, they measure the operational company carbon footprint, development of carbon efficiency guidelines, quarterly progress reports, annual recalculation of companies' carbon footprint, registration, quarterly electronic newsletter, participation in all networking events, networking development with other private and public entities. You create a green supply chain, so that's very interesting, because then people started acquiring customers. So I think that that is very important. What I want to say about using an initiative like this in business, and generally greening businesses, is that you need to understand that the beauty of it is that not one person pays the cost, or not one company pays the cost. Let's say you're a hotel, and you decide to become green. Every supplier, first of all, you go all the way down the chain. Because everybody, if you say, I'm going to be green, like that, what happened in Copenhagen, I'm going to be, you know, as environmentally efficient and carbon neutral as possible. You start, you look at your menu, you look at the way you wash your sheets, your towels, your lights, everything from how you get there, the transportation that you offer, you know, people staying there. So it's a very interesting, because it's a whole chain of companies that get involved. So the cost of changing to a greener system is not carried by one financial entity. And that, I think, is very important for business, because if one company had to do everything, it would require a very big capital investment. And in difficult times, people are afraid to make these changes. And I think as consumers are demanding, for Greece, that is basically a service economy and a tourist economy, I think that this is going to be added value for people to visit. The Excellence Awards, where you're going to recognize what people are doing. There's the next level and additional services where you tell them how to move with the procedures, internal performance, analysis of the company's performance, installation of energy consumption monitoring equipment, you know, getting the senior management involved, communication plans, a green day event. This is not rocket science. These are things that are happening. But it's interesting, if you want to do it, that it's a one-stop shop. Okay, I'm not going to go into more of these details because I think you get the basic idea. So I think everything else is more, you know, for presentation to clients, and you're not clients, you're students. So I think you get the basic idea. The basic idea is to bring businesses on board. So because we don't have too much time and I've been going on, I want to just stop right here, and if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask.
Questions on the initiative, questions on Sophia's experience inside of it? Go ahead.
I'm kind of curious as to how the media is presenting this to the rest of the public, and in terms of sustainability, I'm hearing the discourse itself, right? Is it coming in to the general public as something that they're going to adopt as long-term change in their own values and their mentality like we're discussing? And how is the media involved in that process?
Well, look, I think that I see it already in newspapers. For example, newspapers now have a whole sections on the planet and on green growth and green this and green that. Whenever there's some kind of environmental catastrophe, there's scathing, not only articles, but also, you know, coverage in TV. In terms of the mainstream media, there's one channel, Sky, which is actually supporting this initiative, which really, I mean, you watch their news, and it's 9 out of 10 issues are about various environmental issues. I mean, you know, in Greece, everybody talks about what's going on with the economy, the political situation, but they're very geared to environmental issues that you would never hear of anywhere else. So I think one TV channel, my point is really focused on presenting the changes necessary, the problems, and, you know, what to do about the environment. On the other hand, well, I'll tell you, when this government came into power and Papandreou, the prime minister, was telling everybody about green growth, people were going, oh, it's just like, this is bogus. You know, what does that mean? This is truly incomprehensible. How will this actually work? What does it mean for me? What am I going to do to green myself and, you know, the country? But I think it's interesting because I did bring some I can show you. A lot of the banks now are giving loans in order to put panels on your roof. So there's a lot of incentives for normal people. It's not only for businesses. So they give you a guaranteed price of 55 cents a kilowatt, which is huge when the electric company, the cost of electricity in Greece is like, I don't know, 8, 9 cents a kilowatt. So they're paying you 55 cents for 25 years, locked in price, to get you to use, you know, the panels. And I think that, you know, these are, all the banks are getting in, they're giving very low interest loans, they're going over various hurdles. I mean, in order to get people to take these loans, they're giving you incentives. One of the banks has completely gone green. It's their main thing about how they, you know, they'll give you better deals for your investment if it's environmentally sound, to make your house energy efficient, which also requires a lot of changes within, you know, the infrastructure, for example. So I think it's becoming more of a mainstream thing. People understand that it actually has to do with them and their life, and that they can be part of it. This is not some scheme of, you know, only wind turbines that are going to be built on mountains or, you know, in the water or wherever, or for a few companies that will make use of these subsidies. I do think that there's a lot of work to be done to get people to understand. I mean, people feel it, but they're participating more, and they're going to have to participate more when they understand that the cost of polluting actually has a cost. For example, if I have 2 bags of garbage or 25 bags of garbage, it makes no difference. I'm not being taxed. I'm not being, you know, the municipality doesn't come in and say, oh, you're going to pay more because you have more garbage. So there's no incentive to reduce your garbage. Recycling was almost non-existent. Now it's gone up exponentially in a very short time. I truly believe that school plays a very big role. It really helps parents get on board, because it's very embarrassing when your child has more of an opinion about all these things than, you know, you do. So I think children and education are pivotal. And I will say that I write a lot of books on the environment for children, because I think they're very educational. I think that is very interesting through stories to get kids on board, because these are the things that this is how, you know, changes take place. Yeah.
The policy that was passed, when exactly was it passed for cars that alternated days for people's license tags?
This must be like at least 20 years,
Okay.
maybe the 80s. Yeah, it was effective. Well, look, when it was initially passed, we didn't have unleaded gas. So it had gotten to the point where literally you couldn't breathe. I mean, there were days that the pollution, I remember these days, where you really thought you were in a gas chamber. So they did that. And they also had, you know, factories reduce their output and production when it got that bad, because it wouldn't blow, there was no wind, and it would just sit there. So I think the big change was when we changed technology. We got rid of unleaded gas. We now need odd and even to circulate in the city because there's just too much traffic. It became so cheap to get a car. The car loans were just so inexpensive that everybody got a car. And of course now they're impounding every car because nobody's paying their loan. Because the first thing that happens in the economic crisis, you're going to stop paying the car loan. And it got to the point where you couldn't circulate anymore. So they did it for reasons of circulation and just too many people. There was nowhere to park. They gave incentives for companies to build parking within the city. They've now also created a system where you're actually paying for parking. You can only park so much. They have, in the city of Athens, they actually have areas where the residents can park, because it used to be that you would live somewhere and you could never park your car. So, you know, they're trying to deal, it's what I'm saying, the car is like all powerful. And it's made it a very hostile city for the pedestrian.
I'm afraid we have to cut the conversation here to just allow for the transition for this space. But first of all, Sophia, I'm sure there are a lot more questions, and so by way of reciprocity and in gratitude for your time today and all that you've helped us to think differently about, We'll all compose a question based on the talk. I'll take them on Wednesday and compile them. We'll talk about them together, but we'll also compile them, type them up, and I'll give you a sense of some of the other kinds of reactions.
And anybody who wants to reach me, I mean, obviously I'm available by email, NYU email. And I'd be happy to talk to you about any of this.
We are very lucky to have Sophia around NYU for at least part of the semester, if not all of it.
Probably most of it.
So, and there'll be other opportunities to hear her speak around campus. And also, thanks for offering maybe to engage about some of the specific questions you have coming away from the talk today. So make sure that you give yourself some time to reflect on what's been shared today. Write up a question, bring it in on Wednesday, okay? We'll meet in Silver on Wednesday, and then Thursday night, I'll see you all at the Master talk as well. Before you scatter though, please join me in thanking Sophia for her time today.
It was a pleasure. I think these are very interesting times, although they do say that it's bad to live in interesting times. It's probably better to live in boring times, but I do think it's great. We have a lot of things that we can get done. We can all contribute. What I love about all of this is that it's a process where we can all play a little bit of a role. You know, part of the thing is nobody's empowered anymore. You know, everybody's expecting other people to do the, you know, the good work and the dirty work. So I think, like in everything in life, this is a very good example of somewhere where we can all help and contribute. And I encourage everybody to contribute to NYU's sustainability plan and to volunteer your time and ideas, because there are, you know, there is funding for good projects on the environment, and I think that's wonderful. We had the opportunity of Jeremy Friedman in Greece, who completely bedazzled the Greek press and a lot of other people who met them, and now, you know, people are thinking, you know, how can we contribute? Because what's happened at NYU is a very good example of how faculty, staff, and students, and the administration, which makes the decisions, can cooperate and get things done.
That's great. All right,
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.